I'd like to now bring back all of today's presenters and speakers to take part in today's panel discussion, where we'll be facilitating a roundtable, again, focused on the AI in pharma space from an investment standpoint. So thank you all for agreeing to take part in this and for joining us again for today's event. I'd like to start off with an open question. So anybody who has some thoughts on this, feel free to jump in. Of all the AI in pharma sectors that we've discussed today, I'd like to know if you think there are any that stand out in terms of having a particularly high growth rate, both in terms of VC investments, but also M&A deals and IPOs, SPACs, public offerings, and that sort of thing.
Probably I will start. In my opinion, on the side of AI pharma companies, all the sectors represents quite a lot of opportunities. Maybe Andrei will provide some additional light on that. But what I would like to highlight that on one side we do see that many companies actually pursuing to become public, and that trend became quite clear during 2020. On the other hand, we do see that a lot of biotech companies are now pursuing the model of SPAC, which represents the trend that traditional pathway to become public, which is previously was most common IPO, nowadays it became too much complicated, maybe too much bureaucracy framework there, and many entrepreneurs, many companies actually looking to become public, but using alternative pathway known as SPAC, special purpose acquisition companies, and there was kind of tremendous rise for that pathways during 2020. We can estimate that 2021 will even exceed that kind of, let's say, unusual event during 2020. Now, where I'm leading this? On the other hand, many companies in this sector, AI for pharma, AI in drug discovery, they will not go public for different reasons. Either they're not matured enough, either there will be some additional factors. Many of them maybe will just prefer not to stay private. On the other hand, I think because there's a lot of innovations in R&D, in biotech and longevity in many industries, I would say that there's close to zero any innovations in terms of investment approach, investment technologies, in investment framework. So venture investment approach for AI and drug discovery, they basically are the same as they were in biotech 10 years ago. Where I'm leading this, I would foresee that there will be a lot of opportunities to actually restructure and apply some innovations towards what would be named InvestTech, new modern investment technologies, which will be tied to this growing sector of innovative approaches in artificial intelligence and medicine and intersections of that. I think that if people who joined this our web conference today will stay in touch with us, I mean, we'll be subscribed to Deep Pharma. We'll invite them for the next event, maybe in the next several months, and we'll provide some insights of our particular ideas on structuring that new investment technologies to match with level of progressiveness with which sector itself achieved with applications of artificial intelligence for drug discovery. Andrei, probably you can provide some ideas regarding what in terms of R&D, where are the most potentially lucrative sectors yet, which are yet there and not yet explored by bigger players?
Well, frankly, it's a lot of opportunities there because AI has been around for quite a short period of time. I mean, the concept is very old, but the real commercial value came like over the last 5 to 7 years or so. And so probably in pretty much every therapeutic area, there are opportunities for this technology still to shine. But specifically, I would point out to omics approach. It's a new kind of thing in the drug discovery. I mean, it's not exactly new, but the data analytics that is now being applied to understanding the cells as a system and kind of trying to predict the behavior of different components in the cell. It's not like good old one target, one molecule approach. And this is from a different angle. This is approach from the understanding the systems by modeling the system, and then out of this model and basically getting to new targets which were not possible to derive by by pure experimental methods sometimes. And by the way, one good example is actually in silico medicine. They managed to basically apply AI in a kind of different way than a usual drug discovery approach. They mined data about the pulmonary fibrosis from the literature, and then the AI builds kind of ontology and identifying a completely new target. And so this is not like they did something in wet lab experimentation, but this is they purely came to this idea and this target from the point of view of modeling. And this is a new trend. Like someday we will all be doing drug discovery like this. We are not there yet, but this is certainly a trend. Like this is just one example I can point out.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned in silico medicine. It seems to me, at least, that these high growth areas are often, in fact, dominated by startups as opposed to public corporations. And when that's considered within the frame of the increasingly intensive onboarding of activities in this space by pharma corporations and by tech corporations, I'm wondering to what extent moving forward, whether that will remain the case in longer spans of time, whether there indeed will be room for startups as pharma corporations and tech companies get increasingly active in this sphere. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So, so basically, regarding the actually, can you just rephrase because I missed it?
Sure. In very
Andrei, I will rephrase. Considering that there's more and more interest on the side of super big players or AI companies, but which already actually matured from the level of startups to quite significantly developed companies, is there yet the place for newcomers? I think that yesterday conference and yesterday guest speaker is one of the great one of the great examples.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the newcomers are appearing, and it's a lot. Basically, probably most of the newcomers from the pure
by the way, I think we shall adjust the formation. Not newcomers, but scientists who recently just incorporating companies and commercializing their previous research.
Essentially, it's a very it's Colorado right now. I mean, it's an area where opportunities will be popping up here and there every month, I guess, because now when this it started with the hype, now it's kind of materializing this AI trend. Now every biotech company which is starting, it already thinking how they can start with this data-driven approach from the very beginning. So it's not like they start as a biotech and then kind of try to find where they can fit AI. It's now different. A lot of biotechs now, and not only in the small molecule space, but also in biologic space, in therapy development areas, microbiome research, they all kind of start already with this data-driven approach in mind, because this is obvious. And so the quality of companies new coming to this area will be, in my opinion, higher, because they already kind of on the next level compared to, let's say, a company that started 20 years ago and now trying to kind of redo the R&D approach.
Interesting. But on the other hand, we also do see that a lot of companies which previously were on our radars, they actually failed or just disappeared in this field particularly?
Yeah, I mean, companies disappear for many reasons, and part of the reason is pure business. They didn't manage. I mean, I know examples where their technology was really great, and the technology due diligence was kind of showing that the technology is a good thing, but they went out of the business for probably pure operational reasons, or they didn't meet some expectations, because business is business, it's not just technology. So but of course the quality of the innovation in AI matters, because again you can apply a lot of different algorithms, but if you don't manage to build a system, and it takes time to build a system, then you might not be actually getting to real innovation. And I think some of the companies already on the market which managed to develop this AI stuff, they like end-to-end platforms, they have very significant advantage right now. But nonetheless, I expect a growth in the newcomers, because I believe now this is the time to innovate.
Well, I think this topic relates very much to the question from the audience, namely some comments on the AI hype now. And you, Andrei, told that, yeah, companies can have good technology, but they can quit just due to operational reasons. And Dmitry said that investment technologies are not in line and are lagging behind what's going in the R&D itself. And I think the hype issue is here a key issue, because kind of some companies, they not only have operational problems, they really have tech problems and R&D problems in terms of they use AI just PR step. They kind of do not apply it for the R&D itself. They just use it for marketing and so on. And kind of investment analytics technologies are not used to it, and they do not evaluate really, do not take into account this issue in the full scope. I mean that in order to differentiate between these overhyped startups that are using AI just for marketing and between really deep tech R&D companies, we need quite novel approaches for due diligence, which are almost completely absent now in the industry. And that's why it's returning to the question of Franco. So he was asking about corporations, the number of deals, how it's expected to grow and so on. The same issues with corporations. So exactly as like investors, they do not have sufficient tools by now to differentiate between overhyped R&D projects and matured companies. And that's why, although kind of this number will grow, there will be also consolidation of the industry, and the differentiation between layers of the R&D development. But it cannot happen, it cannot really happen without essential progress in the investment analytics itself.
Igor and Andrei, I have one question, because when I saw your presentations, and in particular those diagrams with profiles of the companies in the form of kind of vector stars. So if I understood right, that comparison of the companies could be done also by quite specific parameters in terms of their comparison, how they are not comparing in one particular specific parameters, but overall the composition of entire company. This could be applied, in my understanding, to startups, but also to mature companies and even public, like big, very big companies, for example, such as Schrödinger. So in other words, I assume that with that technology, which you do have in your possession now, you can not only validate whether the company is overclaiming something, for example, that they having like black box AI system, but in reality, they do not have publicly peer-reviewed publications, some patents or some specific, let's say, evidence of their claims that they overclaimed or overhyped. Now, the question is, if big company, having quite good progress in some particular angles and underdeveloped environment. Can you differentiate those companies? Can you, in other words, can you identify not those companies who are overclaim, but who are overvalued? That means that maybe that could be used even as a signal for shortening them instead of putting bets on their growth. Maybe some of the companies can be somehow analyzed in opposite approach.
Yeah, sure. As you can see on the SWOT analysis diagrams, one or two vectors are dedicated completely to the financial analysis of the company. So we have 20 up to 30 maybe financial indicators, and it is much more easy to do with publicly traded companies. Kind of, we see here the boom, but the boom must be justified, and by analyzing here are basically two approaches how can we observe this overvaluation and what we actually do. Firstly, by the usage of our SWOT analysis diagrams, we just see how is the vector of financial indicators is aligned with all other vectors, so to the extent of their harmonization of various vectors of the development, R&D and finance. And here we also applied specific metrics that allow us to calculate, so to say, the level of the skewness of this data, and to see to what extent is the whole structure is harmonized and close to the ideal triangle or rectangle. And the second approach is using deep neural networks on the analysis of it's predominantly for publicly traded corporations. We have various just tech and marketing indicators, and we have stock market data, capitalization, price to earnings ratio, and so on. And when we regress financial data on all other data, we see that for some companies, actually the predictions are lower than actual results, and for some they are higher than actual results. And it is also a sign of the over or undervaluation, and it can be done for both things, to find overvalued companies and to find undervalued as well, because undervalued companies is another issue, because due to the lack of proficiency in R&D analysis, investors, they cannot not only to miss to find overvalued companies, but to miss undervalued as well. And basically, it's also kind of it is. I think it's very important that we combine both tools. So this SWOT analysis diagram, it's kind of more human intelligence. I mean, it's math, but the math is constructed by by experts, and by financial and tech analysts. But the machine learning, deep neural networks to find over or undervalued companies, it's AI, pure AI without any human or almost any human interactions. And it's also crucial that these systems work together, I think.
Andrei, and do you think these methods, to what extent they could be actually applied for analytics in AI pharma space, but not in terms of investment analytics, but for example, interactions between companies, pharma corporations, some R&D centers, and so on. In a sense, because in my understanding, this market, it's not only about just investments, right, or going public. It's there's a lot of quite significant financial transactions, like within commercial contracts between the companies and their counterparties, maybe pharma corporations, maybe some other R&D, let's say, organizations.
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, we are building a model for that, and actually, it's in the production. I mean, in the like it's being built right now. It's not complete yet, but the idea is that yes, using the natural language processing software, it is possible, and we can do it to basically match the analyze the data, let's say about news or press releases, etc., and find the connections between different entities collaborating, and then we kind of connect them in our database and present it in a graph graph-like knowledge graph structure, so that it is visually understandable, and so that analysts or clients can basically observe this sort of things. So, I mean, this is just engineering problem. It's a fairly complex problem, but that's what we are doing. Essentially, we're building a system that will be able to, and now it's already doing something, some part of that, but not all. And I guess within a couple of months or so, in the way we will make substantial progress in this. But currently, a lot of stuff in this particular regard is done also manually. I mean, analysts are also creating data, and we have a human in the loop process essentially. But I believe we will be going towards more and more automatization and automatic data mining in this regard.
Andre, on the topic of analytical features and functionalities that are not so much investment based, but as Dimitri suggested, could be partnership based. It's interesting that Eeyore mentioned that a lot of the issues that investors are facing in this arena are also being faced by corporations, whether that's a pharma corporation or a tech corporation, which in contrast to startups, which, as you said earlier, are usually starting from day one with a very tight union and harmonization between both biology and AI. These pharma corporations are coming at this as bureaucratic organizations from a pharma standpoint. Tech corporations are coming at this from a tech standpoint without, a vast infrastructure of biological expertise and resources, et cetera. So a lot of these problems are pervasive in these so-called larger players. I'm wondering to what extent the scope of your proprietary analytics in particular might be focused or at least inclusive of tech corporations and pharma corporations looking to get some of this deep analysis, as opposed to, just investment analytics per se.
I mean, yeah, it's primarily for those guys because our key, I would say, differentiator that we are specifically focused on domain-specific aspects, not only financing side of things, and this is a very complex area to essentially we're appealing to technology scout departments at big pharma or big tech corporations. We're exactly doing the stuff that will help them do this, first of all, identification of the potential scope of opportunities, and then basically making pre-due diligence, pre-screening. And then, of course, whatever is chosen, I mean, when they go to a specific deal and they decide to partner with somebody, they will anyway do some kind of their own due diligence. But our job here is to essentially get them to the right direction in the virtually endless area of opportunities. And not all the opportunities are good. And so we don't want them to waste time. So that's why we're here basically to direct them to quality leads, quality partnership opportunities, etc.
I have one question to Ian. Ian Inser. By the way, I was quite surprised to what extent agent analytics went in application of analytics, big data analytics, and even artificial intelligence. If I'm wrong, that you started to compare and analyze countries as if they would be companies, and kind of compare their advantages, disadvantages, as if we are analyzing them, the companies were investors. Is it right? To what extent? What are correlations or differences, and how eventually, if this is right, how all that let's say outputs or insights, how you mentioned something that investors can use that analytics for, I assume, for some kind of long-term predictions or long-term consideration, but maybe you can provide some light on that matter additionally.
Yes, well, for the last 2 years, we've been rating and ranking various countries as entities in themselves. We've been basically ranking them in terms of what a variable we call longevity progressiveness. So essentially, this has a lot to do with data readiness, the consolidation of national strategies, that kind of thing. And yeah, we have detailed frameworks and ranking systems in place for evaluating nations as entities in themselves, specifically with a view from the standpoint of investment strategy.
Well, now, correct me
Igor, if I may, Franca. Igor, what do you think? How good would be, you know, correlations between approaches in big data analytics, data science for like different fields, like AI pharma? Because in AI pharma it is $40 billion. Longevity industry it's $25 trillion. In my understanding, healthcare budgets of national healthcare budgets is something around 15 trillion, maybe 12. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if I'm investor, let's say if I'm considering to become investor into AI pharma sector, and I'm considering several companies, they're different regions. How this could be? How this also correlations with bigger scope of longevity industry, probably including longevity financial industry, and you know, advantage, disadvantages of national healthcare systems, their budgets. How all this, is there any correlations or interconnections in practice, but also how your big data analytics is cross intersected?
Yeah, sure. There is correlation, and the trend is the following. Basically, the more money we have in the industry, the more investment we have, the more data we have, the better is our analytics. So it's rather good news, yeah, because just for AI and pharma, actually, as you mentioned, exactly, we have maybe several billions of dollars maximum, and that's why we have several hundreds of companies. But for longevity, we have 10,000, maybe 20,000 entities, or literally dozens of thousands, and it enables us to implement a really huge variety of AI tools which are not applicable for pharma, for example. Yeah, and the situation is even better for longevity finance, for example, because there's even more money, there are even more parameters and so on. But so in terms of investment attractiveness, in terms of how it can be applied, basically, yes. So the more investment we have, the more opportunities to analyze we have, because money and data, they are very connected. But another important point to mention, and it's also a contribution, both answer to your question, Victor, and contribution to what Ian has said, that approaches for example, startups or more or less mature companies, and for large corporations or governments, they're pretty different. I mean, we have the same general framework, but these two approaches are pretty different because, yeah, firstly, governments, they have another KPIs. Yes, they have another objectives. For startups, it's capitalization, market revenue, and so on. For governments, it can be whatever, but mainly it's some indicators in terms of longevity connected with healthcare, for example, so macroeconomic issues and so on. And also it's one thing, and another thing that there are much more, there are few really compared to companies. There are few states, yeah, maybe altogether 200, but yeah, we have analyzed 150, for example, and that's why the whole process of analysis should be a little bit different. I mean, the deep learning can be applied here less for the ranking, for example, of these entities. May they be large corporations or governments, because kind of you cannot just really apply it very well when there are several hundreds of entities, but it can be applied much better for forecasting and estimation of various indicators in these governments, in the states, for example, or in financial corporations, to estimate their budgets, to estimate their financials, and so on, and to differentiate between kind of their strengths and weaknesses. So it's more, the analysis goes not kind of between corporations or between states, but inside states and inside corporations.
Okay, Igor, understood. Thank you. Franca and Andrei, I actually have a question to both of you. Deep pharma intelligence, it's about pharma industry. Agent analytics agency is about something very different, about not being ill, about prevention of disease. Nevertheless, I do understand that you have very close collaboration, cooperation, very like intersecting activities. So what are the synergies and what are the differences between the two of your companies?
In terms of synergies, certainly from a technological and back-end standpoint, you know, we're both being very closely connected with Deep Knowledge Group, taking advantage and leveraging the wide scope of AI, big data analytics that it's developed over the past 5 years, largely to inform its own investment strategy, as you know, Dimitri, and to get a proper understanding of these industries that are characterized by overwhelming levels of complexity, et cetera. So in terms of synergies, I would say that. And in terms of non-technological, non-resource-based synergies, I would also say that the overall arenas of AI and healthcare and pharma and longevity are more similar than many viewers might suspect. You know, if you look at the broad history of medicine and the way that we treat diseases, I think that you can see an increasing shift towards, you know, increasing precision, increasing personalization, and increasing prevention, and an overall increase in the robustness and sophistication of approaches. You know, AI in pharma is heating up so much and disrupting the healthcare and pharma industry so much, specifically because it's able to vastly accelerate the timescales of drug development and things of that nature. I think that connects quite well with the very apparent increasing emphasis on prevention and the paradigm shift from single disease treatment to you know, actual prevention of diseases, early diagnostics, with the aim of overall optimization of health. So in terms of synergies, I see it all as one rather smooth historical trajectory. Longevity just being a little bit farther down the road in terms of being embraced, you know, by large players and by national healthcare systems, which it already is, mind you. Andrei, anything to add in terms of synergies and divergences?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say about differences, I guess, because well, the value that we are bringing to the table essentially in being able to see the granularity of the healthcare industry in general. And this industry is extremely complex, but it's very different in many ways. For example, our pharma division is primarily focusing on the pharmaceutical R&D, biotech, and this is very different from healthcare, let's say. The like diagnostics or maybe medical care or etc. Because AI is applied in all those areas, but in a very quite different way and with quite different targets. Let's say pharma industry is all about creating new therapies, and this is product-driven industry. Essentially, we have to get a molecule to clinical trials and make sure it gets to market. That's the pharmaceutical task. Whereas, for example, that in diagnostics, AI is used primarily to, you know, to provide services to doctors so that they are being able to, you know, to identify disease or malignancy in patients with higher precision, with less cost, etc. So the targets are different. And the longevity is something quite different, and it unites both worlds, I would say. So the longevity is kind of the pinnacle of this whole healthcare thing, because it includes, of course, pharmaceutical companies, therapeutics developers, but it focuses very much on also preventive medicine, like wearables, health, mobile apps, a lot of service-oriented companies, essentially. So AI is very different in those things, so many differences. But yes, as you said, of course, similarities are also present here. So
yes, your whole point about compartmentalization in AI and pharma versus longevity is actually quite a good one. Indeed, longevity does sort of take a more holistic approach in terms of not just single diseases, but whole body, whole health. Not only that, but wealth span and financial wellness over extended periods of healthy longevity, as opposed to just health, etc. If we were to choose a single divergent point, I'm sure that would be it. And of course, it's worth noting that that broad scope goes hand in hand with the overall larger scope of the industry, the larger plethora of sectors, the larger number of entities, which, as Eeyore knows, prevented quite an ambitious hurdle to actually accomplish in terms of transitioning these analytical technologies from the AI and pharma space to the longevity industry.
Yeah, I would agree. So,
well, I would love to continue this discussion further, but I think that we're over time, so perhaps it makes sense to wrap things up. Thank you all once again for joining us today. It was a pleasure hosting you and moderating you. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
So once again, for everyone viewing today, I'd like to thank you for joining us on this second day and second event of our two-day event series, focusing on the AI and pharma space organized by Deep Pharma Intelligence. Once again, my name is Franco Cortez, Director of Deep Knowledge Group's longevity-focused analytical subsidiary, Aging Analytics Agency. And it was my distinct pleasure to be your host and moderator for today's discussion. Once again, thank you to all of our panelists. It was really insightful to hear your specific talks, and I think that we covered some very interesting counterpoints and back and forth in our panel discussion. Viewers who are interested in getting a more in-depth view of the whole scope of topics that we covered today, including in particular the AI and pharma space from an investment takeaway standpoint in 2021, are encouraged to visit and read the full Deep Pharma Intelligence Investment Digest at deeppharma.tech/investment digest or /global investment digest. I'd like to remind all of our viewers today to make sure that they visit the Deep Pharma Intelligence homepage in order to subscribe for additional updates, announcements on future project releases, as well as invitations to upcoming events in the coming weeks and months. And please note that all of today's attendees will be emailed a full recording of today's session, as well as a written summary of today's events, which will be published on our corporate blog. Thank you once again, both attendees and panelists alike, for joining us today. Please keep an eye out for our future webinars, projects, and events, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.